Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. So good to be back with you. Lovely to see you all in the chat already, having a big old chat. I am here tonight by myself. No Chewy with me. Chewy's a bit under the weather, so he's taking the night off. So if you're watching Chewy, we wish you well. We wish you all the best. Well, I hope you're doing well. Hope you're okay wherever you are in the world. Yeah, in the world, I guess. We're having a pretty interesting time here in the South Island at the moment. Very much to see it's a country of two halves. If you had a look at the map today, it was like South Island was winter, North Island was summer. If you looked at the temperature colorings, South Island were all blue and cold. North Island were all orange and yellows and warm. It's very, very bizarre. I was sorry. People are seeing the shirt that I'm wearing. This is 20 years old. I put it on today and forgot I was wearing it. So I didn't take it off, planner. So yeah, this is, I'll show you. Turn it around. Check it out. See? Name on the back. Oh no, this one doesn't have a name on the back. That was stupid of me. This is when I was working for radio in Auckland, but it's really comfortable. And I put it on and didn't really think about it. Ironically, this shirt was basically too tight for me when I worked at More FM in the late 1990s. So this is now too big for me, but it's really comfy. So I'm wearing it. And because Chewy's not here, I don't have to dress up and look nice. I just have to look like a slob. So anyway, a tale of two countries today. We had 9 degrees again in Dunedin today. We had a fire for the first time this year in March. How mad is that? A fire in March. We did indeed. Hey, lots to talk about tonight. Lots to cover off. We're going to be looking again at the Posie Parker rally for a couple of things. We're also going to be having a look at Stuart Nash as we go through the night. One of the things I want to have a look at with the Posie Parker rally is some people are starting to do a little bit of investigating as to who was there. And as we know, you're not responsible necessarily for the people who are at your event, but it is always an interesting conversation to be had. Asking the question, why are these people being attracted to your message? Is it something about your message? Is it something about you? Are they going there to shit stir and actually just to, because you know what you could do technically is you could come along and if you knew that your name was toxic, putting your name to something that you wanted to actually speak against might make that seem toxic. What was that all about? Also, the potential arrest of the tomato juice thrower. We're going to have a bit of a chat about that. Because, you know, we talked about this on the Monday and that if this is deemed that the police should get involved in anything they deem potentially an assault. And it looks like they're starting to look at some of the images they've got off video and they're going to start to investigate. Now, that's the correct path. No one's saying that means that people are going to get arrested or there's going to be any charges, but the correct path is for police to go, hey, young person who punched a 70-year-old in the face, we need to speak to you. That then goes through the system. That then you get to find out if there's charges and then there's criminal activity. Now, that punch in the face certainly looked like it to me, but that's what the courts are for, and that's what we try and do. And look, we talked about this on Monday, and our guest actually stayed, who was with us for the first part of the conversation, who was at the Wellington it was a rally at that stage. It wasn't a protest. And at the end of it, she came back on. She was still here. So we brought her back into the room, had a chat afterward. And she said, oh, you trust the courts a lot, don't you? And I'm like, nah, no, it's not necessarily that. I know that there's problems with the courts. I know that the courts have a bias to them. I know that the courts treat the various people groups worse than others. However, it's the only system we've got at the moment. I mean, what's the alternative? To let a young person punch a 7-year-old in the face and go, no, well, that's not a solution. The only solution we currently have is to investigate and see if there was anything there. And if there was, do something about it. And if there wasn't, clear the person. So let me say before we kick into it, a big thanks to our patrons. Love you all, 22% more than anyone else on the face of the planet. And we are always excited to have new patrons and stuff on board. If you're interested in getting behind what we do, if you're interested in coming and saying hey and supporting what we do, then you can help us continue to make independent news by visiting patreon.com/big hairy news. What are we saying? Our new little slogan? Something like calling out the bullshit since 2021. Something like that. I don't know. Okay. So let's start, I think, with Stuart Nash. I think that's an appropriate place to start. I think today it's the biggest news story in the country. There are other big stories as well, and there's big commentaries to be had. But at the moment, this is the biggest news story in the country. So let's have a look what was being said on 3 News tonight. Right. I was just thinking these guys here, who are the people who received the email, they must be pretty pissy about the whole thing as well. I'm sure they didn't want to be dragged into the public eye. Oh, don't do that, Si. Is there no sound? Are people saying no sound? Oh, you guys, I apologize. Right, I'll start again because we're like that. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I do apologize. I thought I had this all sorted, but it appears that perhaps we don't. Dun, dun, dun. See what happens when Chewy doesn't come? Blame him for this. I'm just going to close my system down, stop the screen, and I'm going to share the screen, and I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to go into, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to start from the very beginning of the story, and that'll give me 30 seconds for you guys to make sure that you can then hear it. And I'm sure that will work this time. But if it doesn't, I'm just going to talk gently over as well, because rather than have...
The Prime Minister has announced an investigation into sacked Minister Stuart Nash, who has decided to stay on as Napier's MP for now.
We get going,
and the opposition is crying cover-up after it was revealed Nash's email leaking cabinet discussions to his donors was flagged with the Prime Minister's office 2 years ago. Here's political editor Jenna Lynch.
Stuart Nash turning up to Parliament, but turning away from scrutiny.
Minister Nash, will you stand down from Parliament?
No comment.
The embattled minister's time was called by his boss last night.
This evening, I have advised the Governor-General to dismiss Stuart Nash from all of his ministerial portfolios.
After he learned Nash had leaked and criticised a cabinet decision of a corporate rent relief package to businessmen Troy Bowker and Greg Loveridge.
I was saying that those guys there, they must be livid that they were included in an email that they perhaps, I don't know, I'm not saying they didn't ask for it or didn't want it, but now their names are plastered all over national news to do with the sacking of Stuart Nash.
Both men had donated to Nash in the past. There were only 2 words.
Utterly unacceptable.
And utterly let down.
I've worked with Stuart for a long time. I'm absolutely gutted, to be frank.
Why did you release confidential information?
Like I said, guys, no comment.
Leaving it to the Prime Minister to clean up, Hipkins announcing a review into all Stuart Nash's communications with all of his donors.
Stuart has advised me that he will fully cooperate with that review.
In the email to his donors, Nash says, "I am as annoyed and surprised about the final outcome of the commercial rent package as you are. I should have argued much harder."
Well, I think the verdict was delivered last night.
But a review of Hipkins' own office has turned up an uncomfortable verdict of its own.
Yeah, this is the new news out today. It's an interesting one, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. But basically, not to preempt it too much, the previous Prime Minister's office knew something of this. We don't know exactly how much was known yet, and it appears that the Chief of Staff and the Prime Minister didn't know, but there is potentially more to come from the story.
The Prime Minister's office already knew about this email. It came up during an Official Information Act request in 2021. The Prime Minister's office ordered it out of scope. He says neither Jacinda Ardern nor her Chief of Staff were made aware at the time.
I can't speak to why it wasn't flagged up at the time.
So what kind of culture is it if you don't actually flag those issues up higher up the chain? It's a cover-up.
I don't think it tried to be covered up. My understanding is that it just wasn't within the scope of the request.
This was Nash's...
Now, I'm assuming and I'll chase this. I'm assuming someone made an Official Information Act request. That email came up as a part of that request, but it wasn't within the scope of what the request had requested. So it wasn't. It was sort of there but not seen. I'm not sure. So we're going to find out more about this. Trust me, as you know, we play every ball on its merits, and we will delve a bit deeper into this over the next few days.
Fourth strike. His first was contacting Police Commissioner Andrew Coster about a court case. He finally fronted on that today and said there might be more.
I have, I suppose, flagged the potential for there to be further conversation on that.
But strike 4 or strike 1, this was it for Nash.
That's pretty. Well, I can't say that's devastating about the police commissioner, but that's, shall we say, that's ominous. Basically saying, well, you know, there might be a few more things coming. I'm not sure. That's not a good response. You know, you want solidity and absolute knowledge in these times. That's not that.
Prime Minister saying last night the single offence was sackable in its own right.
He didn't put up a defence. He accepted the seriousness of the situation. He offered his resignation. I did not accept it, and I indicated to him that I was going to dismiss him.
I want the guy to get a fair go in this circumstance when all the vultures are standing around, as I said, with this holier-than-thou attitude.
So tonight we're going to talk about when people are associated with your message. I wonder how Mr. Nash feels about Winston Peters basically standing up for him. Winston Peters is saying, give him a fair go. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I just wonder how Stuart Nash feels about Winston Peters being someone who has his back.
In a Facebook post, Nash apologised and said, I do want to be clear, I got this wrong too many times. Fair cop. The Prime Minister did what he needed to do. I accept this with humility, telling the people of Napier, for now I will continue to be your local MP, confirming there will be no unnecessary, messy and expensive by-election. This is the last thing our city needs, but it doesn't say if he'll retire at the election.
Come on, guys, give it a miss.
Will you run at the next election?
His Napier constituents split on whether he should stay or go.
He's blown at this time. Wake up. He shouldn't be sacked.
I think he's done his dash.
News Hub understands Nash will give it the week to make up his mind.
Have you done anything else wrong, Minister Nash?
Whether he'll close the door on politics for good.
Oh, nice little kind of play on words at the end there. Closing politics for good. Yeah, it's he talks to, I think, One News, and we'll play a little bit of this, I think, but it's interesting he wouldn't talk to that journalist. And there's a lot going on here, yeah? And yes, there are people are mentioning things like Oravita and things in the chat. We are going to get to some of that as we go through. And it's not as a defense for what Nash has done. In fact, we were one of the groups calling for, you know, further investigation around the police commissioner when that actually happened, and there wasn't any. So we're no defenders of the action of Stuart Nash. But what I am always interested in is seeing how other political parties are playing this out and what it means for them. And yes, you already know some of the names I'm going to mention about National. This is probably seen as different, probably because it is different. He's a minister and he gave commercially sensitive information to a group. So yeah, that's at a different level. But we all know the name I'm thinking of about someone who would not deny using a bed leg on a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old boy at one stage. You know, I'm not saying one, I'm not going to compare them. You can compare them in the chats if you want, but there are some other things still to come. And every political party needs to either be careful because they're going to be held to the same standard, or they're going to be hypocrites when they don't. That's still to come. So Nash got caught up, I think, at Wellington Airport by One News and had a bit of a chat with them.
Can you remain an MP, do you think, after what's happened after the last week?
Absolutely, I can. I've been working hard for Napier ever since I've been an MP in Napier. Love the city, love the people there, work very hard on the issues that are important for the people of Napier.
Why were you sharing what had happened in Cabinet with your donors?
They were two men who were very, very passionate about making sure that SME owners got a fair deal from multinational commercial business owners, but also ma and pa commercial building owners that had multinational tenants. These were two men who owned companies or were part of companies that had done the right thing. There was an injustice there, and we were working very hard to find a solution. So there was absolutely no benefit whatsoever for those gentlemen, no benefit for me in any way, shape or form.
Wow.
Only a solution for an issue that SME businesses found themselves in the middle of lockdown and alert levels.
Do you recognise, though, that it was wrong to do what you did?
I know what I've done is wrong.
He nearly said, I knew straight away. That's what it sounded like he was about to say, I knew straight away. I wonder if that would be interesting. If he knew he'd done what he was wrong, here's the question. Did he know when he did it? Or does he know now that he's been caught?
Lockdown and alert levels.
Do you recognise, though, that it was wrong to do what you did?
I know what I've done is wrong. I've admit that. I know the rules, and I got it wrong, and I paid the price for that.
When Carmel Sepuloni today, she said, that you betrayed Cabinet and you betrayed your colleagues. Do you think you betrayed them?
Well, I don't go that far. I mean, what I was doing was what I believed was right in advocating, but I know the rules. You're not allowed to share what goes on in a cabinet meeting, and I've paid a pretty high price for that, but I accept it.
That implies he knew at the time. I know the rules. You're not supposed to share. I paid a high price. Now, unless what he's saying is, I didn't know the rules at the time, but it appears that he did know the rules and he actively broke them.
Stand by the Prime Minister's decision. I've apologised publicly to the Prime Minister, my Cabinet colleagues and my caucus colleagues and the people of Napier, my staff, my family. So, onwards and upwards.
What are you going to do now for the rest of the year? You're going to knuckle down, or are you going to sort of reassess your options?
Oh, well, there's a lot to do in Napier. We've just been slammed by a cyclone. I couldn't spend much time there because I was a minister with five very busy portfolios. I will knuckle down and go hard for the issues that are important to the people of Napier, which I have always done as a member of Parliament.
Hey, Shane, you've been talking to Shane Jones and Winston Peters. Is there something going on there? Are they talking to you about maybe joining New Zealand Force, or is that off the table?
Shane and Winston are very good friends of mine. I have the immense amount of respect for Winston and for Shane. Shane came to my wedding. He's a good mate, and both of them called me, as mates do when another mate's in trouble.
Yeah, the problem, Mr. Nash, with that conversation is the police commissioner was a mate as well, wasn't he? The police commissioner was a mate talking to a mate. And now you're talking about your mates in New Zealand First. And you've got Winston Peters defending you. The old saying, waka jumping? Maybe. Just speculation here, people.
I think you said earlier today that you're going to think about your future over the next week. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got to have a conversation with my wife, with my party members. I've worked hard in Cabinet for nearly 6 years. And I've worked hard as a member of opposition for 6 years. So, and then there was a time in between when I was out and I was campaigning. So I've been doing this full-time, full-on since 2008. 48 weeks of the year for the last 6 years, I've had a black bag that takes me 10 hours to read every Sunday. It is a very, very demanding job being a cabinet minister. I loved it. It was an absolute privilege, and I think I made a difference.
Gosh, imagine that. I couldn't do that. 10 hours a day of reading on a Sunday reading would be horrific. So there's more to come, obviously. I'm not necessarily going to go through all of this now, because if you want to have a look for yourself, maybe you can go and do that. Stuart Nash says pretty clearly in this. It's a mea culpa. It's a good mea culpa as well. I mean, this is the message that was already featured in News Hub that we showed. It's a pretty good mea culpa. It's a pretty meaning it's an appropriate, I did bad. I was wrong. I'm not going to burn down the house as I go. There's no scorched earth coming. And that was pretty much that. It's the main salient points have been brought out from the news story as well. Some comments that have been coming in. Luxon knew nothing about Uffindale assault. What sort of culture? Yeah, it's a good point. But see, what Luxon said about that was it's appropriate that the National Party handles this, not me as the leader. Luxon is setting the standard. Wait for the big fail when one of his trips up. Yeah, but this is the thing. Yeah, either they'll be honourable, and I'm not even just talking about National, any politician, and if they're criticising now, they have to do that, or else they'll be hypocrites. And typically, political parties become hypocrites. Now, some of you guys are picking up on this as well. Winston will feature later in this. And I think David was also referring to bigger news. Maybe that's to do with Winston as well. Craig says he said it. Apparently, fair cop. Yep, that was in his statement. Interesting to know what the OIO was about. Says no faux Ali. Sunset says Luxon is stating his crew are squeaky clean. He hasn't been there that long. Sooner or later, some dirt will come out. And look, I think that's inevitable for any political party. Some dirt will come out. But the question is, the serious nature of this versus whatever that is. I mean, I could do this right now and just go to show. I'll do Carl's comment first. Carl says, it's one thing to advocate, it's wholly another to share outside of cabinet. It's basically a trust issue. There's no equivocation that gets around that. Agreed. Now, I've got this as a part of the thing to show you as well, and you'll all have seen this image before. You know, honestly, says Gilmore. Anyone says Barclay. Jamie Lee Ross says Wood. Falloon says Think. Walker says We. Bazant says Havan. Smith says ingrained culture. Uffendale says and vetting problem. So there's no political party that's going to be that's not going to come under these kinds of scrutiny, this kind of scrutiny that the MPs are fucking up. Basically, the question is giving sensitive information from the ministry table more serious than any of those things. As we find out more, I guess we'll find out if it is or if it isn't. Right, let's go to Today FM. Lloyd Burr today also spoke to the leader of the opposition, Christopher Luxon, and Christopher Luxon is very keen to see an inquiry into all of this. A lot to do with what happened in the office of the Prime Minister, to do with what they knew and what they did or didn't do. Now, remember, the office of the Prime Minister is not the same office of the Prime Minister there is right now. There's a new Prime Minister, but the leader of the opposition wanted to make sure that his voice was heard on this, which is fair enough because he's the leader of the opposition, about what should happen and the inquiry that should come from this.
Potential cabinet information to his donors who had an interest in this area. Essentially what that means is both Nash's office and also the Prime Minister's office knew about this issue. And then Chris Hipkins is saying that Jacinda Ardern and his Chief of Staff, and subsequently himself and his Chief of Staff, were unaware of actually this email in existence. And so as he undertakes the inquiry that he's committed to today to do, he should be, as he thinks about the terms of reference, asking questions about the culture of the Prime Minister's office because, as you know, this is a serious and egregious issue. This is something like we haven't seen before. It's a pretty, a strong rule about you don't leak anything out of a cabinet, through the cabinet manual. We know that the rules around.
Mr. Winston Peters has been saying today as well, every cabinet leaks. He says there was a ton of leaks when he was last in that coalition. Every cabinet leaks. So is it that this time someone's been caught? Is it that this time the paper trail goes straight from information about businesses to business owners? Does that make it more egregious? Perhaps. But I think it's also important to be real and say every cabinet leaks. That's how journalists, bloggers, commentators get information that's not yet made public. Not doing that as a defense, just if Christopher Luxon would be Prime Minister next, his cabinet will leak. It will happen.
That. And this is an email, frankly, that should have been elevated, I think, to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, and it's hard to believe it wasn't.
Yeah, that's a fair point from Mr. Luxon. What he's saying is, if the Prime Minister and her chief bureaucrat didn't know, that's a problem. And if they did know and it's been played out like they didn't, then that's a problem. I actually agree with that. If this was within that OIO and it was seen and identified as to what it was and it wasn't elevated, that's a problem as well. It's a fair point from Christopher Luxon.
Believe that it wasn't? Do you believe the line that the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff didn't? And if that is true, what on earth is going on within the culture of those offices in which people are either too scared or don't think it was serious enough in order to elevate it?
Well, that's the question, and that's why I'm saying he needs to extend the terms of reference of his inquiry to include the culture of the PMO or the Prime Minister's office to see why wasn't this issue elevated if genuinely the Chief of Staff didn't know.
And when Chris Hipkins asked Stuart Nash, I think it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whether or not there are anything else, are there any other skeletons in the closet? Surely Stuart Nash would have known about that, and his office would have known about that. Even people, officials in Chris Hipkins' office would have known about it.
You would have thought so, right? And I imagine, I don't know whether there's staff from the PMO from 2 years ago that are still there today that would be aware of that issue, and that would have been a time to have raised it, I would have thought as well.
But you have to be aware as well, again, not as a defence, but the Prime Minister's office is not two people, one with a phone, one with a typewriter. Someone within there may have seen it. So the office of the Prime Minister saw it. That might be one person and they saw it, but it was outside the scope of the OIO, so it didn't go any further. Perhaps. So the absolute sort of line that Mr. Luxon's drawing between the current Prime Minister, the previous Prime Minister, and the officers may not, and all I'm saying is may not, because I don't know, may not be as clear as that. I mean, if there's 20 people who work in that office, and because it was outside the scope of the OIO, it never went past the one person to remove it, that's very different from if it went through 20 people in the office and 10 of them are still there now. So as we always say, devil are in the details.
But certainly for Stuart Nash not to have raised it with the Prime Minister at that time is incredibly worrying. So I guess from my point of view, you know, what I'm just trying to say is we have to have some absolute standards around this. This is a really serious, egregious breach of cabinet information to donors. It's not. It's a serious issue, as Chris Hipkins said last night, and we have to make sure that we've got high integrity cabinet ministers. New Zealand's reputation of being transparent and being a great place and with good governance and good government is important, and the integrity of cabinet ministers is part of it.
Yeah. So there's more to go, but we've got the gist of it from Mr. Luxon. We're not going to go through every single fantastic word piece of pearl of wisdom he had to share, but that was the gist of it. And look, the idea that the devil's in the detail, we need to know. It would be good to know who in the Prime Minister's office, the office of the Prime Minister, knew. And if it was outside the scope of the OIO, does that mean the OIO was done, one person in the office then got the information for the OIO and kind of had to ignore it because it was outside the scope? You know what I mean? Like if I'm a journalist, I'll give you an example. Journalists and radio announcers and stuff get embargoed information all the time, right? Like, so for example, a really minor one is who's winning the King's Queen's Medal Awards and, you know, the New Year's honors. That typically comes out 3 or 4 days before they're actually announced to the public. So we have the information, but we're not allowed to use it. Now, if because of the scope of the OIO, a person saw the information, but because of the legality around OIO, they weren't allowed to use it. That's again very different from if it went from one person to another. They went, oh shit, this doesn't look good. Or they went to another and then didn't go up the chain. So again, not as a defense to what's going on, but the devil will always be in the detail. A few more messages that have been coming in. Vicky says, just go back to Judith Collins and see what she's been up to. JK says, Jerry Brownlee broke airport security law while Minister of Aviation. He was removed as minister and kept his job as an MP. Yeah, I mean, again, not to split hairs, but Jerry Brownlee did something that was bad according to the law, but perhaps it wasn't. He wasn't nefariously doing something around the backs of his MPs from privileged, you know what I'm saying? Privileged information. I don't know. And yes, since when has Luxon been an expert or a shining example of running a great office? Is another person. The last thing I just wanted to say on this, and I put a tweet out about this today, so if you follow me, you may have seen it. If you don't follow me, what are you doing? It's quite simply this call for him to be gone from Parliament. That's Stuart Nash. Now, the problem with that is we're 6.5 months away from an election. Yeah. Now, I really feel like the same people who are calling for him to go, if there was a by-election held, would be then going, oh, look at this Labour government and how much money they're wasting on a pointless by-election. So this is a bit of a damned if they do, damned if they don't. I think when you're 6.5 months away from an election, no by-election is going to happen ever. And I think that's the reality of it. So my tweet said 6.5 months until the election, and people are questioning if Stuart Nash should go or not. Seriously, if NZ Labour was to announce a spelt wrong, election, the chorus would be, what a waste of money, so close to an election. Damned if they do. See you at 9 p.m. And I think that's the reality. I don't think anyone can actually... I don't think there's an answer here that's going to suffice the whingers, because if a by-election had to be called, it would be a waste of money. If a by-election is not called, it's how can you keep that MP in, the untrustworthy one, for the next 6 months? I think that's opposition politics at its finest, if you really want my honest opinion. All right, any more texts that have been coming in? Lots of them. And you'll appreciate, I'm sorry, that without my co-host tonight, I am a little bit hamstrung between doing screen stuff and doing chat stuff. My screen's over there. The chats are down there. Actually, the screen's over there, and the down there. Anyway, so we will continue. Of course, if you super chat, that's easier to find. Hey, I want to have a little bit of a look at some of the Posie Parker stuff as well, because more and more information is coming out. I want to play this for you first, because this is some of the information we shared on Monday night. Now, remember on Monday night, we looked at a couple of incidences of, and I'm only saying apparent violence, not because I'm trying to defend the actions, but, alleged crimes, alleged violence. And some of them looked cut and dry. Well, one of them in particular. Other ones there were questions around. This is a clip, and if you can see, if you're watching, in the middle of the screen here, I'm going around a picture of a protester in green. And this is the clip, and this is not the actual clip, but I'm going to give you the clip that we showed. Like, I'm going to just clip it to what the clip was. Protester in the middle of the scrum here, if we call it that. And this is what we saw on Monday night. And that was it. An elbow to the face. And that was it. Shall I play that a little bit again, in case you missed it? So here is the protester, right here. Here is the protester here. Boom, 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 boom. And here, just 1.5 people away, or 2 people away, is a gentleman in a black leather jacket. The protester, I would say pushes. You could say hits, whatever word you want. I'm not going to debate you on that. In the chest or throat area away. Right. And so I'll play this for you again, because the clip that we saw on Monday night was 3 or 4 seconds, and it looked something like this. Have a look. You watch the middle of the screen right here. Here we go. And that was about it. That was about all we saw on Monday night. Well, I should be fair. That was about all I showed on Sunday night, because Chewy said to us very clearly that there was other videos going around that showed extenuating circumstances. Now, I think it's good to show this as well. Again, this is just the information as we have it. We have Te Rangi Kai Whiria Kimara, who's done a little bit of investigating into this and looking actually at this imagery, this footage, and also what he thinks he's seen from doing it. There are a bunch of people at the moment who are looking through a bunch of the footage to find out what perhaps potentially was a crime, what wasn't a crime. Citizen journalists, you might call them, documentary filmmakers, journalists as well. Now, I'm going to play this for you. It's got a fantastic voiceover that comes with it. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to, with my mouse, if you're watching, circle what's being talked about as well, just to try and make it a little bit clearer for you to see. I don't really need to do anything, but we always like to have context. So this is the context. Well, I guess I should be fair and say this is the context as interpreted by the investigator here, as to what happened that led to that push with the 2 minutes before it, not just the 5 to 7 second clip. Let's have a look and a listen, and you can watch my mouse to help you find places.
Tēnā koutou. I will try to walk you all through this incident that is being clipped up in such a way that it is designed to show a part of the picture Posie Parker supporters' social media circles. This was taking place when inexperienced security of Parker's brought her from the rotunda without waiting for police to create a corridor.
That's actually a brilliant point. If one feared for their life, and I know that I was watching some of Posie Parker's live stream, and they were saying, where are the police, where are the police? But there's a very important point to be made here, that they did not wait for more help to come to clear a path. They chose to go into the scrum, right? Again, not a commentary on fault, just an observation as to what happened. They were in the rotunda. They didn't wait for police. They chose to go through the scrum.
A Posie Parker supporter stepped forward and initially tries to empty a bottle of an unknown substance into the side of a protester's right ear. But realizing the cap is still on, removes the cap and empties the substance into the face of the protester. A protest warden in a yellow vest comes from behind to prevent this assault, but another Posie supporter came from behind her and assaults the protest warden, putting her in a headlock, which she quickly escapes from.
And you'll notice that the other Posie Parker protester, as described by the commentator, is the man in the black jacket. So the man in the black jacket just put the warden into a headlock, female warden into a headlock, which she escaped quite quickly.
Seeing the assault, another protester in a green beret steps forward and pulls the Posie supporter's left ear. He steps forward agitated somewhat. As Posie Parker security, showing their inexperience, lunge forward. The protest warden appears to be frantically explaining the situation to both the Posie security and the Māori protester to her left. It is at this point that the Posie protester, who initially assaulted the protest warden, locks his right arm on her right arm and shoves the protest warden in front of the Māori protester.
So you got all that so far? Sorry, I didn't mean to pause that.
Warden turns to the Māori protester and they exchange words. I can imagine she is asking for help as this man will not let go of her arm. The Māori protester indicates for the protest warden to step aside, then steps forward and shoves the entitlement right out of the Posie supporter. And that last bit is the clip that is being circulated. Nami.
So, paint a slightly different picture. Protester, maybe protecting, maybe looking after the warden, and a push. Now, that was one of probably the two more serious clips that was doing the rounds. Obviously, the punch to the elderly person looks is no commentary other than looks horrific. And that one, which, when you get the full context of it, actually looks reasonable. The man in the black jacket, black leather jacket, black 80s leather jacket, seemed to be the aggressor in lots of the incidents there, and the protester pushed him out of the way. That's how it appears to me. I don't think any court in the world would find that an assault. However, that's where we're at right now, and that's what I saw in that. So we're going to go on because there's also, speaking of court issues and assaults, the Posie Parker juice thrower says arrest warrant is imminent. The protester who threw tomato juice over anti-trans activist Posie Parker on Saturday says an arrest warrant is about to be issued against her. Speaking from Sydney, Eliana Rubashkin said police arrived at her Auckland flat this morning and spoke to her flatmate as she had already fled the country. I said, wow, this is so scary. And I asked for help from friends and they helped me come here, Sydney, Rubashkin said. As she was frightened by the response after the incident and had been receiving threatening messages. I know my life is going to change. I'm afraid because I know a lot of people on Twitter, very important people with loads of followers, are advocating for me to be removed. Now, this is going to sound really horrible to a lot of you, what I'm about to say, like really horrible. However, I said it on Monday night and I'm consistent. On Monday night, I said of the violence or the pushback or the angst about the protesters, I said, what did you expect to happen? I will also say, if you are a counter-protester and you've made yourself very public by doing that to Posie Parker and then, and I'll show you shortly, kind of celebrating what you've done, I will also say to you, what did you expect was going to happen? Now, just like on Monday night when I said that, I wasn't saying the assaults on people in the crowd were okay, but I said, what did you expect was going to happen? Just like I'm saying right now, any sort of vitriol or something thrown at the protester is not okay, but what did you expect was going to happen? You chose to participate. And this is not a criticism, by the way, because this is someone who stood up for their rights and stood up for what they want to do. I support you, but I also know that what did you expect was going to happen afterwards, especially when you made yourself so public and started to celebrate. So here's some imagery in Sydney, and the tag is Aussies, where do I get the best Bloody Mary on town? Slay! Again, no criticism, just consistency. Posie Parker, what did you expect was going to happen when you had been riling up those people so much that there wasn't going to be some kind of vitriol or pushback or argy-barginess? It wasn't okay, but what did you expect? protester who has spent the last week celebrating, making herself very public with what she did, what did you expect was going to happen? Not victim blaming, just like I didn't victim blame on Monday. Not saying she deserves it. I'm just saying the response you're getting is not okay, but what would be expected? Just to show again what's been going on during the week. The protester was born intersex and is gender non-conforming, dropped a litre of tomato juice on Ken Minshall shortly after the controversial speaker arrived at Auckland's Albert Park on Saturday. I am so proud I dropped the juice, and I would do it again and again. And if I have to go to prison for 1 year, I am more than happy, they said. I think that the protest was fine. I said on Monday night, technically, pouring the juice over the head was probably an assault, and the police probably need to look into it. That would be the fair thing to do. I don't believe any charges will come from it, much like when, what's his name? I was going to say Simon Power. I forget his name. National MP was hit in the face with a dildo. I don't think any charges came from that. But when we take these stances, when we go out into public and we make and we're passionate about what we do and we stand up, no one's suggesting that vitriol, anger, especially violence, is okay. But we also live in a world where we know that people are people and how they're going to react. So not okay, to be expected. The argy-bargy at the Albert Park, not okay, to be expected. Stephen Joyce, thank you, people. So I just want to let know again that assault, at least one assault, I think, and look, I'm not a court, so that's who will decide. At least one assault, which was that punch in the face of the elderly person, happened. Okay. Other things looked like they could be and should be investigated, and the tomato juice on the head is one of them. Now, if you're going to participate in public disorder as a protest, amazing. You have to be prepared that there could be legal consequences for that. The number of people who throughout the era have handcuffed themselves to things, who have had sit-ins and been arrested, and they've suffered legal ramifications from their protest. It happens. It's part of it. I'm not saying this to say you deserve anything. I'm saying this because I'm observing what happened. Because we go on, because the consistency is also going to come back on Posie Parker shortly when we acknowledge that every single one of her supporters that was at the protest is a white supremacy Nazi. Well, only based on her standards. Her standards. Rob, we had this chat last night, and I still agree, Rob. You might be right, but tomato juice on the head should not be the highest priority for police. Where are the arrest warrants for the anti-trans protesters perpetuating actual non-juice-based violence? I agree, 100%. And you know what part of it might be, Rob? And maybe this is a little bit of a pathetic argument. I'm not that I'm arguing for it. Is that I'll say again, the protester has spent the week. There's a photo that she took for stuff.co.nz celebrating tomato juice. Maybe this protester was easier to track down. It might be as simple as that. Not saying it's okay. Look, there's actually no commentary from me on good, bad, or different, other than the punch in the face of the 7-year-old. I've got commentary on that. What I'm saying is this is the world we live in. You are making a stand. Your stand is public disorder, potentially. That's a legal requirement, but you know what I mean? And there might be ramifications for it. That's what the story is. I don't think anything will happen to the protester at all. I don't think there'll be any criminal charges, but the police have to get in there. Maybe someone in the chat will be able to tell me this. You'll know better than I would, because I said this the other night. I'm too involved in the American system, and it's the DA who brings charges. Who is the person in New Zealand who decides whether charges will be laid or not? The police bring the person in, and then the person gets either charged or not by another entity, Crown Law or something like that. I doubt that anyone's going to be going after someone and laying charges for tomato on the head. I really don't think that's going to happen. I mean, we'll wait and see, but I don't think that's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that, technically there may need to be an investigation of an assault. Right. I'm a little bit reticent as to sharing this, this story. You'll understand why very, very shortly. This is there's some research going on at the moment. We're talking a bit about the what's going on. Crown prosecutor, thank you, Peter. There's some research going on at the moment. Some people doing a bunch of looking into who was at the actual event, right? And this is from the NZ Herald today. Posie Parker anti-trans rally attracted a range of far-right groups, researchers are saying. I want to just go through and I'll read you a little bit of what's in here, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit about what this means. If we go by Posie Parker's rules. Now, I'm happy in this instance to follow what Posie Parker's been saying about generalizing about everybody. Because if it's good for Posie Parker, it's good for us. We can generalize as well. Researchers who specialize in extreme groups in New Zealand say the audience included a range of individuals on the far right spectrum, from right-wing populists and Christian fundamentalists to neo-Nazis. 4 young men wearing all black and covering their faces with skull masks were pictured flashing Nazi salutes before the rally. I was probably thinking a rabbi. Before the rabbi. They wore symbols of the Azov Battalion, a far-right ultra-nationalist regiment of the Ukrainian military, and the Boogaloo Boys, a US-based anti-government movement whose members were involved in storming the Capitol building in 2021. Paparoa, who I've been talking to today, they don't do interviews. Paparoa don't do interviews, and they say they don't do interviews because they want to keep their researchers safe. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, it means you can be, behind a wall and never be held accountable if you got something wrong, but that's their decision, and so be it. Paparoa, a group of researchers which cover the far right in Aotearoa, said the men were part of the emerging group of neo-Nazis, traditional Catholics who they believe promoted extreme anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, and Islamophobia. This is the bit I'm a bit nervous about. You ready for this? Have you seen it already? They said that Sam Brittenden, I don't know, no relation, got literally no idea. They said that Sam Brittenden, a member of the white nationalist group Action Zealandia, was amongst the group at the rally. And this is the thing that I freak out about, because if you didn't get the context and you just heard this line, you might think of another Brittenden. Brittenden pleaded guilty to charges of failing to assist police with a search in 2020. That search followed a threat against the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch, although it was never confirmed that he made the threat, and he never was charged over this incident. He was previously found guilty of disorderly behavior for making anti-Muslim slurs while a student at the University of Otago. When challenged about their Nazi salutes by the Herald, one said they were making Roman salutes, a gesture linked to fascism and Nazism. They later said they were Christians who were against transgenderism. Transgenderism. Story goes on. Other controversial figures at the rally included Voices for Freedom, one of the anti-vaccination groups which coordinated the Parliament protest in 2022, and Counterspin Media, an alternative media organisation led by Calvin and Anna Help, which has previously focused on COVID misinformation. The Alps, are they both Alps? And they're married. They are married. Okay. The Alps are facing charges of distributing objectionable material. Their court case is ongoing. A number of members of the new Conservative political party attended the rally. The party, an offshoot of the Conservative Party, had veered right since the departure of its founder, Colin Craig, focusing on American-style culture war issues. Co-leader Helen Houghton has previously petitioned Parliament to ban any teaching about gender diversity in schools. In a statement, she said she was at the protest to represent and speak up for women. Another new Conservative, probably speak up for women as long as you have a man above you. Like a man is the head of the household, I would think. Another new Conservative candidate, I'm not going to even attempt that, South African name, I would assume, De Boer, also attended the rally. De Boer helped to organise the visit of far-right speakers Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern in 2018. Activist and researcher Byron Clark, friend of the show, said the far-right individuals were mostly on the fringes of the rally. Most of the people who are going along to these things to support Posie Parker wouldn't be far right, but the far right sees them as a group that they can find an audience with. If they can push this idea about transgenderism as an example of the degradation of the West, for example, transphobia has become the large part of the far right's ideology. They see it as a kind of deviation from the ideal straight cisgender white person, in the same way they see homosexuality and disability as being deviated from this ideal. It's become prominent because it's still something of a more socially acceptable prejudice, so more so than racism. So they can use this as the thin edge of the wedge to gain an audience amongst a more mainstream conservative crowd. Right. So what we do now, and I would encourage you all to follow me on Twitter and spread this tweet around, is we use Posie Parker's own logic against them. Okay? Because there were some actions by a very small minority at that at that rally that caused Posie Parker to say things like New Zealand hates women. New Zealand doesn't let women speak. The transgender activists, all of them, stopped women speaking. So the actions and the appearance or the reality of a minority in the crowd, gives her the ability, she thinks, to make an overall general statement. So here's my challenge to you. Here's my idea for you. From now on, what we can say is that every supporter of Posie Parker who was at the rally on Saturday is a neo-Nazi or a white supremacist or a far-right activist. How can we say that? Because some of them were there. Posie Parker is making these statements based on some of the actions at the rally. So can we. So my tweet today, so explain this to me. If the Posie Parker can make generalizations and sweeping statements based on the actions of a minority of the counter-protesters, then so can I. I actually said, then so can I? It's me asking a question. All of the people supporting her at the weekend rally were white supremacists and Nazis. And then I just asked, is that how we play the game? This is the thing we're almost talking about a bit with the political parties. It's the consistency thing, yeah? It's like, if you're going to say that, if you're going to take a slice of people who were there or a slice of the population, and you're then going to attribute that to the whole population, then so are we. Because if that's the game you want to play, we can both play it. So anyone who supports Posie Parker is a Nazi, a white supremacist, a far right, an alt-right fringe lunatic, because some of them were. Now, I do sense you get the facetious nature in which I'm saying these things. However, I'm actually following logically through on what Posie Parker did as well. I guess what I'm doing is showing the lunacy of what she's doing, but going, if you want to play this game, we can play this game too. We can say that you're all Nazis because some were there. Can't we? Is that not at least fair? I think possibly so. Right, now I haven't seen any of your messages. I thank you for sending all of those ones through. So I'll just go through. It'll take me a bit longer to grab a few of them here and there. Of Stephen Joyce, Mr. Anderson says that was his career highlight. I'm going through. I go through. JK says there was a security guard on film committing assault. Where are his charges? Look, the argument as well that was made earlier by Rob that, you know, this is a minor part of it. I agree. Now, if this is the only person they investigate for any kind of assault, completely inappropriate. But if they're going to go through and start looking at what happened and go, now let's just check on this. Now let's just check on this. I'm actually okay with that. I feel like I'm okay with that. And as I said, I think the reason that perhaps the protester with the tomato juice was picked out one of the first ones is that everyone knows who it was. I got a message the day of the protest asking I should connect with this person and talk to them. So we knew who that person was on the day of. So Josie Butler threw the dildo at Stephen Joyce. There were no charges laid by the police. Correct me if I'm wrong again. Look, I'm not an expert in this, but I don't think police lay charges. I think that comes back to the Crown prosecutor. So I suspect there was an investigation and no charges were laid. That's how I suspect it probably happened, which is what I'm saying about the tomato juice. There'll be an investigation and I suspect no charges will be laid. Thank you, Planner. Sam Britton and Pat's evil twin. Yes. Yes, very, very, very evil. Peter, of course, wants to cite the Blues Brothers as we do every day of the year. I hate Illinois Nazis. I believe she also called trans people groomers, so I have no problem with calling her a Nazi. Yeah, and that's the thing. If people use generalizations against you, I'm not saying it's clever or smart or haha, we got you. It's not a gotcha. It's like, we'll just play those rules back. We'll just generalize back again and it'll be a ridiculously dumpster fire of a conversation. Like, absolutism doesn't really work when we live in a world full of nuance. Looking through. This makes good. This is, if you listen to the audio podcast, this is good, isn't it? And JK says that Joyce didn't want charges, so there you go. I wonder if Posie Parker would do that. I suspect not. having seen some of the tweets. I've now got fucking Posie Parker in my Twitter feed. I don't follow Posie Parker. There's actually several people I don't follow, and they always pop up in my tweets, and I don't understand why. Elon, come on, we've been talking. We haven't been talking. We should fix that up. All right, I'm done. If you want to get any quick messages through, you can. Without Chewy here tonight, we are going to hit our 1 hour mark and not go to 1 hour and 99 minutes, which we have been doing recently of our 1 hour show. But that's the stories for tonight. Now, there's lots more going on. I don't know if Chewy will be back again tomorrow. If he's feeling a bit better, he will. If he's not, he won't. But I will, yes, Planner, I will be. You know how to get hold of me. I will be around tomorrow. There is an event happening in Dunedin tomorrow that I might try and get along to as well. And we will catch you tomorrow night. I don't think there's anything else to say other than this. Thank you to all our patrons. We love you to bits. Remember, if you become a patron of Big Hairy News, then instantly you become 22% more attractive. And when you become 22% more attractive, you also get 22% luckier and more attractive to the person of your choosing that you would like to be attracted to. It's just all you got to do is become a patron, and you become that much of a better person. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Laters all. I think we started with Mr. Anderson. So we finished with Mr. Anderson. Laters all. Nice to see you all. And yes, Planner, just you know how to get me. You can get me in 5 minutes, and whatever you need, we can sort out. Other than that, team, we will catch you when we catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thanks for bearing with me, being a moron, doing things by myself, but we got there in the end. And I will catch you and speak to you at 9 p.m. tomorrow night for another edition